Welcome, everyone. We'll get started in a few minutes. All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. My name is Aaron, and I'm on the community team here at PlayVS. For those who don't know me, I want to thank you for joining us here for our Wednesday Coach Chat, our weekly kind of a webinar we do on different, revolving topics around esports and our scholastic esports programs. So yeah, feel free to say hi in the chat. Throughout this presentation too, we'll be using the Q&A function if you have any questions, and we'll be taking those at the end. Most of this today, I'm going to hand it over to our super coach Justin to kind of take over the presentation. But I really want to welcome everyone. And yeah, I want to kind of introduce Justin. For those who don't know, Justin is the head coach for Spring Hill College in Mobile, Alabama. He spent 13 years as a high school educator, spending 2 of those years as the head coach for Baker High School in Mobile, Alabama. After leaving the high school classroom for a district level role as a technology resource teacher with Mobile County Public Schools, he accepted a position as the esports head coach for Spring Hill College. Justin has been part of our Super Coach program now for well over a year. It is an amazing resource, and just I can personally say an overall great guy as well too. So yeah, Justin, I'm going to hand it over to you. Run with it, and thank you everyone again for joining us.
Awesome. I'm excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this. It's something I've been kind of putting together for the past couple of days, like just the slide deck. But even before then, this is something that I feel very passionate about as an esports coach, and that word coach for esports is a little bit of a misnomer. When we think coaches, we think like skills coaching. Really, you're all mini athletic directors, is what I like to say. So you kind of have to wear many hats, and you're really, in most cases, at least the schools I've been dealing with and the coaches I've been working with, even in my own situation across the two different places that I've been involved in esports with, is I'm the only one that's really hands-on involved in all that. Obviously, I have the athletic department supporting me, but really, if you want to get something done, I mean, there are no other I guess divisions of your school or departments that are going to do it for you. You kind of have to do it yourself. So what we're going to talk about today is some free graphic design tools. I'm going to put an emphasis on GIMP. That's GIMP. That website is gimp.org. So if you would like to, you can go ahead and download GIMP, because we're going to have an interactive portion of the session today where I'm going to provide you with some materials that you can turn and work with at the same time that I'm working with them. So I'll kind of show you what I'm doing with them, and I'll give you some hands-on experience. And if you're feeling brave enough, you can share with everybody what you made. And I think it'll be pretty fun. So GIMP is gimp.org. That is the website. Let me double check that, make sure. It's gimp.org. Yes, gimp.org. So that is one of the perfect. Thank you. That's one of the free resources that we're going to be looking at today, and the one specifically we'll dive really deep into that you can do. So we'll get into this a little bit more now. So today's agenda, what we're going to do, I'm going to give you an overview, give you some background on what the big deal is with this. We're going to have the interactive workshop portion, and then we're going to get into a Q&A session, and you can feel free to ask away any questions. But I'll give you a fair warning, preface. This is not my background. I'm not a graphic designer. I do have my master's is in library media, so I have a lot of experience with educational technology, and that is my daytime job when I'm not doing esports. I'm a technology resource teacher, so I work with technology push-ins and PD sessions for local teachers with all sorts of ed tech tools and things of that nature. And these are the types of tools that I would train teachers on to hopefully use and incorporate in the classroom and things of that nature. All right, so let's talk overview. All right, so why graphics for your program? And why I'm going to stress that you should know how to do this is because you are the coach. I mentioned that you are, kind of an athletic director, but I don't want you to think that this responsibility just has to be on you. Ideally, this can be something that you can relay to your students. If you've got an assistant coach that's a student kind of fulfilling that role, you've got some students that are subs that really aren't quite at that starting varsity roster level, and they really want to be a part. They can handle this. But at the same time, you could also just bring somebody into your esports program that doesn't want to compete at all, and then give them this responsibility, and they can kind of run with it. So why do this for your program? Why have graphics as a part of your program? One, the first thing, it does promote your program and your students. I've got some samples of the things that I do with my students at Spring Hill down there at the bottom of the screen. So the big thing is promotion and getting your name out there. It's more than just the 280 character limit with Twitter or making Facebook posts, or if somebody just happens to stumble across your school's website and find your esports page, make yourself a Twitter account and start putting these graphics out there. Promote your players, promote your program. And in turn, that goes into that bullet point number 3. It's going to build some program pride. We're going to come back to bullet point 2, building your program pride. The students really like it. I've found they like to see themselves on there. They like to see their faces. We're all our own biggest fans. When we really get down to it, we like to be bragged upon. And this is a great way of doing that, is bragging on your students and promoting them and promoting your program. back to bullet point number 2, providing industry experience. This is a great avenue for you to make your esports program more than just competing, more than just we're going to come into the lab on Tuesdays and play League of Legends, and then Thursday we're going to play Rocket League, and then every time in between that you should be practicing. It's beyond that. It's more than that. We need to be trying to train them for, or at least give them exposure to the elements of those esports industry. Because I mean, let's face it, if you have any kids in your esports program that are going to go pro, they can do it from home. They don't need you to go pro. They don't need a college program to go pro. That's the 1%, or less than 1% of players that can even get that far. It's the rest of them. It's the 99.9% that we can provide them that industry experience of learning, shoutcasting or graphic design or video editing. So I really think that this is a cool element to bring in. And if you can learn kind of the bare bones of it, you can then help them learn the bare bones, and then they'll kind of run with it from there. And then finally, this is a great way for you to enhance your stream. Those of you that may be live streaming your matches over Twitch or YouTube, those live broadcast softwares that you're using like Streamlabs or OBS, you can use graphics to create overlays with GIMP, which is free. But you create these overlays to enhance your stream, and put your logo on there, and put some borders and a chat box and a webcam box and all those things you can design yourself to really spruce things up and add your color palette and just really make things your own and set your program apart from all the others that are out there. So let's get into some basics. I used my own green screen headshot for this today. I've reduced the quality of it, but a little spoiler alert: the material that I'm going to be giving you to work with, one of the materials is this headshot. So please don't do anything too crazy with it. That would be embarrassing for me. But let's just talk about a couple things with this already. So 2 different major image types that we're going to be talking about is JPEGs or JPGs and PNGs. And there's a big fundamental difference between these two, that if you're not familiar with graphics and working with graphics, this is kind of what you have. This is really what you have to understand. JPEGs, they do have a smaller file size. They're universally accepted. Those are just about any type of image that you're going to download off the internet, or even that you would take with your smartphone. They're typically going to come out in a JPEG type file format. The downside to those types of formats is they lack transparency. They cannot hold the transparency channel or a transparency element or an alpha channel. They can't hold that. Whereas PNGs, on the other side, they have a larger file size. They do have some software requirements in the sense of, if you're going to work with PNGs efficiently, you've got to have particular types of software. That's where GIMP comes into play, that we're going to be talking about here in a minute. But PNGs do hold transparency, meaning if I have an image that has a transparent element to it, and I save that image as a PNG, when I then use that PNG in stream overlays or social media posts or what have you, I use it to build out a graphic, it's going to keep the transparency. So I have that illustrated here. You can see the orange line moving behind both of these images. Notice the JPEG. I removed the background from this JPEG. This image actually had green behind me. So I selected all the green, I removed the green, but you'll notice I can't see the orange line behind this JPEG image because transparency doesn't hold. Whereas on the PNG, I removed the green, I saved it as a PNG or exported it as a PNG. That's very important. And then now I can see the orange behind it. So that's basically fundamental differences between those 2 file types. All right, so why transparency? Why is this important? Well, once you get into building graphics, you're going to want to work with graphics that have transparency. If you're going to feature your own students and take headshots of them, and if you want to use green screen, you use green screen, great, but you don't have to use green screen. We'll talk about that in a second. But you can take those pictures, remove the background from them, isolate just the headshot of your student, and then as long as you have that in a PNG format, then you can build out those graphics. So you look here at the bottom, this is something really corny that I threw together, but this one on the left was using This one is using a JPEG. And then this one here in the middle, number 2, was using PNG. So you can see the difference. With the JPEG, I'm going to keep that kind of white background. It doesn't bring that transparent element, but using the PNG, I'm able to see past the background of that picture. Transparency in graphics allows the stacking of layers. And when you work in Streamlabs or you work in uh, GIMP or anything, any of those programs, they do have layers. Graphics work, they view from the top down. So if you put a transparent PNG image on the top layer, it's going to reveal what's underneath it in those subsequent layers. So same thing we work with when our stream software, when you work with OBS, this is a stream overlay down here in the bottom right that I built. This is one that we use for our program that we stream on Twitch. So our game window is here in the middle. And then in the bottom left, this is our webcam. So I just built in that transparency. You can see the orange through it. So this literally is, it is a rectangular image, but it's got some transparency elements in the middle. So we're able to put our game window behind it instead of having to rest it on top. So these stream overlays do require transparency in order for them to work very efficiently. So that's why transparency is so important. Working with those PNGs, very, very important. Okay, so tools for working with graphics, a couple things. So if you want to make some graphics like this, where you have some headshots of your students and you want to convert them over into like a PNG format where you remove that background, GIMP is the one that we're going to be looking at tonight. That is very Photoshop-like. We think Photoshop, very intimidating, a lot of features, very robust. There's a lot you can do with it. So GIMP has quite a learning curve. I'm still learning a lot with GIMP. I typically use a lot of Photoshop instead of GIMP because I have that premium version. But for free tools, GIMP is great. Adobe Spark. I teach Adobe Spark to some of my teachers in the district. Very, very cool to use. It does have a background removal feature. I will display that or demonstrate that for you tonight. However, although Adobe Spark is free, the free version does put a watermark on your graphics that you create. So if you can stick with me and try GIMP out, I think you'll be pleased with what you can produce. And then use Adobe Spark as kind of a fallback plan if that gets kind of difficult. Adobe Spark is very similar to Canva. Is like a browser-based graphics editor. Okay. And then finally, here's a website called Removebg. That is also able to be used to remove backgrounds of pictures. So you can have a PNG file for your students with transparency, and you can begin to build some graphics for them. So I will demonstrate all 3 of those as far as the background removal feature, but we're just going to specifically dive into GIMP for the graphic creation aspect of it. The bad thing about Remove.bg or kind of a negative to it is if you want to upload a very high quality image to have the background removed, you cannot download a high quality image back without having to pay for it. Okay. But with GIMP, we can do it for free. All right. So tools for taking photos. If you're going to work with photos of your students and then build those graphics out, I will recommend a solid contrasting background color. So contrary to misinformed beliefs, you do not need green. I use green because I happen to have a green screen, and it's just really easy to use it because the green really stands out. So it's easy to grab that color and remove it. However, any solid contrasting color would work. So it needs to be a solid background color. It just makes things very easy. If you don't have a solid background color, you can still do it, but it's very, very tough. And then lighting. Super important. Having multiple lights aimed at them. If you can't have multiple lights, that's fine. You can still make it work. The quality is going to degrade a little bit. But if you want the best effect, definitely have some lighting. I'm not talking about a flash. Okay. It needs to be like a consistent, solid light. So even if you have lamps, you have a lamp and you take the shade off of it, that can still work. It's better than nothing. You definitely want to have some lights on your subject and even on kind of this back left corner of them as well to kind of make them pop off the background a little bit. Okay, so let's get into showing you what this is like. So you should be able to see my screen here. So we're gonna go to remove.bg first. So here is the website remove.bg. I told you this is a tool to work with removing images, removing backgrounds to images. So I'm gonna upload an image that I have here. It's my cropped headshot. I'm not sure if you can see my file that's open here, but here's my original that I just uploaded to them, and it's got the green background. And then I can go to the tab of removed background, and it automatically removed the green for me. One thing to know that's very difficult to work with when trying to remove backgrounds to create some of these graphics is that stray hair can be difficult to work with. Jewelry that's kind of dangling away from the body, or even things like glasses that cause reflection can be difficult. So you'll see on my beard, it's really weird. It kind of feathered it out a little bit, which is fine. That's just, I've come to accept that I can't take really good green screen pictures because of it. So I just accept it. But either way, it's removed. Now I can download it, and I have this image, but notice the restrictions are there. The download HD is something I would have to pay for through remove.bg. So that's that tool. And then Adobe Spark, I'm going to show you that really quickly before we get into GIMP. Let's go to, we're just going to create a custom size, social, Twitter. Okay, so I'm not going to get into too much with Spark. You can feel free to reach out to me, and I can go into more in depth. I already have some recorded PD for it, but it's browser-based graphics editing software, and so you do have the ability to add your own assets to it and then modify them over on the right side. But you technically could build out your whole graphic here in this. I can add a photo, upload a photo to Spark. And then there is the option on the right to remove background. It is a beta feature. Sometimes it works well, other times it doesn't. But because I have that solid contrasting background around this headshot, it does effectively remove that green. Still some green around the beard. That's okay. But that's basically Spark, how you can do background removal. This is something that I made in Spark just to show that it can be done to create some graphics for it. This is Calvin. This is one of our players. And this had a green background, but I removed it. I threw a purple. I put some smoke in the background, and then I can add some text and things back there as well. So Spark is a really cool tool, very intro beginner friendly. It has a very simple interface. But I do want to show you GIMP just because it's so robust and there's a lot of stuff you can do with it. So this is what I'm going to do first. I'm going to share with you this folder, and it's going to give you some resources. And during the next section of the kind of workshop, I'm going to be working with these same files, and I want you to be able to work with them as well if you would like to. So I'm going to copy that link. This is to my Google Drive. We're going to go to chat. Okay, so there is Google Drive, so you can access that, and there should be. Yeah, so JPEG won't hold transparency, but if you create a graphic with the transparency, I'm answering Philip, if you have to end up using PNGs to create the initial graphic, and then from there you can export it as a JPEG. But you can't, if you were to use it with a stream, you were to export a JPEG to do like a stream overlay. If you were to work with that graphic and anything that requires overlays, then the JPEG wouldn't work. But yeah, if you build out a graphic and then you're going to export it to use like on a website or something, then you can then export it as a JPEG once all the layers are put together. But as far as the construction of the layers, you're going to have that transparency element there. Okay, so I'm going to switch over to share with GIMP. we'll get into this program. So in the folder that I gave you, there are 3 different files. There's my headshot, there's a background, and then we have a Play Versus logo, which we're going to be able to do some really some other cool things with. So when you first get into this, it looks a little intimidating. I mentioned earlier it's it's a very robust program. It is absolutely free, but it can be a tad overwhelming in the sense of there's so many features and functions available to it. It's a little intimidating. So when you first launch it and we get into this here, I need to create a canvas because here there's nothing to work with. I have just this gray screen and there's absolutely nothing here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click File in the upper left-hand corner, and I'm going to select New. Now, you can design or choose what you want your image size to be here. 1920 by 1080, that's 1080p, HD widescreen. That will be great for creating overlays for your stream. I'm going to use 1200 by 675. The reason why I use that is very common for Twitter images that you're going to create and then post online. So that is a frame where it is not going to adjust the size of the image when it's in the Twitter stream. So if your image is very large and it's outside of the dimensions that would run in the Twitter stream, it's going to crop it a little bit until someone clicks on it, and then it expands to full size. So we don't want that. We want them to be able to see our full image in the Twitter stream, and then if they want to open it up and see it in more detail, they can do that. So I'm going to do 1200 by 675, and that's going to give me a canvas here. Now, so my canvas initially is going to start off with a black background, but I can change that. You do have some tools in the upper left-hand corner. These are all the tools. I kind of give you a brief rundown through most of them, not all of them. The Move tool in the upper left-hand corner, this is going to allow me to left-click, hold, and drag elements of my canvas. Whatever layer I have selected, I can move it around my canvas. On the right side of my screen, here in the bottom right, these are my layers. And right now I only have one layer here, and the layer is background. If I have the Move tool selected and I left click and hold on this black background and move it, you'll notice that I can actually move my background around, and here is my canvas. So this is very elementary as far as like working with graphics, but this checker pattern here indicates transparency. That's what that is. So when we see those checkers, that is transparency. So I can move my background around. That is a layer that is completely movable. I can shift it around my canvas, do whatever I want with it, and I'm going to add a couple more elements to this as well. Okay. Any tool in here in the upper left-hand corner that has a little arrow in the bottom right-hand corner of it, if you right-click on that tool, it's going to give you another tool as well. So some of these tools are collapsed in themselves, and you can expand them into others. So the rectangular select tool allows you to select elements of the layer that you have there. And that selection can be moved around. And this could be where I want to select a particular portion of this layer and then delete that portion, or I want to select it so that I'm only working inside of it. If I wanted to select that, just select this little portion and then use a bucket fill to create just a purple rectangle in that selection part of it. That's really what the selection tool is for, is to manipulate a specific area of the layer that you're working with. There's also the ellipse select, not eclipse. This is to create circles, basically. The next tool, this is where we can get into working with things beyond just the fuzzy select or anything like that. We can do free select. So this allows me to kind of draw an area. If I were to try to fit in some, there we go. If I wanted to select, just someone's head, I could try to do that with free select. It makes things very, very difficult and tough to do. So that's why we try to be optimal with the background that we're choosing. anytime you start working with selection and some of these things, even if you're working in Photoshop, it's very important that you learn some of the hotkeys for deselecting. Um, and so in GIMP, I believe it's Control Shift A. Yeah. So select, we want to deselect something. None is Control Shift A. But you may find sometimes where you're working with a selection and it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense of what's happening in the program, or you're trying to do some action. Like if I have a rectangle portion selected here and I grab my paintbrush tool, I'm painting here. I'm left clicking, I'm dragging, I'm painting, but nothing is appearing. That's because I can only paint inside the area that I have selected. So if you're trying to perform a particular function and nothing is working properly, it may be because you have a certain portion of your graphics selected, preventing you from doing that. Okay, so one of the tools that we're really going to work with a lot as far as like you want to create some of these graphics for your students is this area here, either select by color or fuzzy select. So what I want to do is I'm going to bring in multiple layers now to this canvas that I have, this 1200 by 675. I'll bring in a few things. Let's see. So the chat, that folder link should be there. I did send that out to all panelists. I wonder if Zoom blocked it. Hopefully it didn't. I'm going to bring in all of those elements that I had told you about that I was sharing with you in Google Drive. So I'm going to click File, and I'm going to open as layers. I could select Open. What that will do is it'll add all these graphics in different tabs at the top, but I actually want to add in these elements as layers into this one canvas. So I'm going to File, Open as layers, and I'm going to go to my graphics that I made for you. So we're going to take in this headshot sample. I want the PlayVS logo, and I want my background. And these are the three that I've shared with you. And they're bringing them in, and here they are. So they're all stacked on top of each other right now. So everything in the graphics, it views it from the top down. So when you look over on the left-hand side, these are your stacks of layers. This PlayVS logo is on top. Maybe difficult to see. This is on top, so it's going to be seen first. If I put it underneath, if I drag it down and put it underneath my headshot, there's my headshot. It now appears. It was there the whole time. I just couldn't see it because it was covered up by another graphic that was on top of it. My background is also there. If I drag PlayVS logo down beyond the background, now my background shows. The PlayVS logo is still there, but I don't see it because it's behind my background. Now, let me show you where it's important to kind of know or have layers selected. So right now, I have the PlayVS logo selected as the active layer. Let me make sure that everything, yeah, I've got all panelists. Okay, it was all, I had just had all panelists. Sorry, my mistake. So now I have the PlayVS logo selected on the right side. That is what is selected as my active layer. I have the paint tool now, the paintbrush, which means I'm going to left click hold and I'm going to draw all over this thing. I'm drawing and I don't see anything happening to this graphic. Nothing's there. I'm drawing all over it and nothing is seen because the layer that is being affected is the one that's the active layer on the right side, which is the PlayVS logo. If I drag it back up to the top, you'll see I actually was drawing all over it, but I couldn't see it because it was hidden under those other layers. So we're gonna Control Z is your best friend. That's the undo hotkey. So we love that one. All right, so this is what I want to do. I'm going to show you the different ways of kind of working with these graphics. I still have some purple on there. Okay, perfect. Okay, so let me move my headshot up to the front. We're going to move PlayVS to the back, and then we're going to work with my headshot here. So with my layer selected on the right side, I can use the move tool. I can move this around. So this is its own layer by itself. I'm just moving it around. If I want to remove the green from the background, I have a couple of options of how to do that. I want to select that green and get rid of all of it. So there are two tools we can use for that in the upper left-hand corner. One is called the Fuzzy Select tool, And the other one is the tool that's called Select by Color. So both of these use a similar tool in the sense of it's using color to try and determine which areas it wants to select. So I'm going to use the fuzzy select tool first because they essentially work. They work very similarly. So I'm going to click on the green, left click on the green in this with the fuzzy select tool. And okay, I have some settings that are off. This is a good segue. So you'll notice it may be difficult to see, but it's not really selecting much. There are a couple of dancing lines in there. There are some settings on the left-hand side. When you select fuzzy select, underneath that, there's an option for threshold. That threshold is referring to how the layman's terms, it's how strong do you want this thing to be. So right now I have it set to 0. So it's not very strong. So it's going to select colors of a one very specific shade of green. So I'm going to crank that threshold up a little bit. I'm going to crank it up to 127. And this is not going to give me the results that I want, but this is just for demonstration purposes. I'm cranking it up to 127. I'm going to select. So now you'll notice it's got a lot of dancing lines around my face. So my threshold is way too high. I'm selecting green, but the threshold is so sensitive that it's actually grabbing colors beyond the green that I want it to grab. So I'm going to dial it back a little bit. Let's drop it to 67. We'll click on the green. Okay. Still having some issues. Drop it to 34. That's a little bit better. So now we start to see it work a little bit. I tend to work with low thresholds. I'll drop it to 13. And this is what you see. This is what I typically see. So I have a lot of areas where it didn't grab. So it tried to grab a lot of green, but it didn't grab all the green. In this case, I'm going to leave that selected. I'm going to hold my shift key, and it's going to turn my fuzzy select tool into an additional fuzzy select tool. So what this allows me to do is now I can click on another part of green, and it's not going to erase the previous selection I had. Let me show you what happens when I don't hold shift. I can click, see it, now it selects over there. It selects up there, selects on the right side. I don't want that. I want all that stuff selected at once. So I'm going to hold shift and select and select. So now you start to see kind of the dancing ants around my headshot. I'm just clicking all these different areas of green just to make sure I get everything. And it's trying to, and it's getting all of that. Okay, so now all my green is selected. The very important key in GIMP to erase or to delete something is the delete key. When I do that, I'm not going to get necessarily the desired results, but I'll go ahead and show it to you anyways. I'm going to click delete, and all it did was turn the green background to black. The reason being is because this was imported as a JPEG image, meaning it doesn't have transparency. So I'm going to Control Z. I'm going to get rid of that I just did. And this is what I want to do. On the right side over here on my layer, my cropped headshot sample, I'm going to right click that. And there's an option here to add an alpha channel. What that does is I'm adding a transparency channel to this particular layer, to this layer of my face. Okay. So I'm going to add that alpha channel, and nothing really changed. You don't see it. But where that black was when I clicked delete and I got rid of the green, now the black won't be there. The black was just a filler because the software didn't know what else to do with the image once I removed that element because there was no alpha channel. Now when I delete the green, all the green goes away and I can see the purple and black gradient background behind it. So before I begin manipulating this image, again, I want to clear my selection. So I'm going to Control Shift A, or I can go to Select in the upper left-hand corner and select None. And that's going to get rid of it. So now I can use my Move tool. I can move this image around and kind of position it where I want it to be. I don't like how small I am in this image, so I can scale it. We're very used to, in other images, grabbing the corner and moving it, right? Grabbing the corner here and scaling it up. You don't have that liberty here. Instead, there is a tool in the upper left-hand corner called the Scale tool. I'll left-click it, And now with my headshot sample layer selected, I can left click, hold anywhere on this image, left click, hold, and drag it up, and that'll scale that image up. I finalize it over here in the upper right hand corner, scale, and there it is. So now I've kind of scaled that image up and I have it in there. So again, I started with just that picture of me, but I'm able to use those selection tools to kind of get, highlight that background, add the alpha channel, and then get it removed, get it completely taken out. You'll notice there's some imperfections here. Those are things that I would spend more time cleaning up. You're not going to see a lot of those in what you're doing, just because I'm hoping that a lot of your esports student athletes don't have beards or crazy wild hair, but they might. In that case, there are some ways to go through with your selection tool. Once things are selected, you can what's called feather the edges a little bit, and you can control how much it feathers. So you can select it and even try to delete some more. And so I keep delete, delete, delete. And then now you'll see it's a little funky. It looks a little soft around the edges, but it works. But you'll see I kind of got rid of some of the beard there. There are multiple ways of doing that. That's one tool, and that wasn't perfect. That was very quick. There are other tools in Select where I can shrink or grow that selection. I can feather the selection. There are also ways where I can grab the eraser and I can zoom in. Zoom in this, you hold control and you scroll with your mouse wheel. I can scroll in and I can try to trim out some of that green with my eraser, like so. But again, it's not perfect. I spend just enough time on this to make it look somewhat decent, and then I call it a day because I got so much other stuff to do. All right. Next, I want to show you what you can do with tools that aren't necessarily, or basically graphics that aren't necessarily meant for this. So I'm going to work with that PlayVS logo that I have. I'm going to drag it up to the top layer. Here it is. So if I wanted to grab this PlayVS Firebob here and use him in my graphics, I could do that. There are a couple of different ways that I could do that. Obviously, you want to I will say this. They've never minded that I use their logo if it's on promotional material. So I haven't run into any issues yet. So Aaron, you can correct me if I speak out of turn, but if you're competing in like a PlayVS event or something like that, I've never had them buck my using their logo. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there. We actually allow free use of our logo, and I'll put in the chat here. We have some brand guidelines, but yeah, we pretty much allow, even if you want to put it on clothing as well too. We totally allow that as well. So I'll put that in the chat here in a second.
Awesome, cool, thank you. So for this, what we can do, we have a couple of different ways. So if I want to isolate this Firebob and create use it in my graphic to promote this, this player that's back here, I can use my fuzzy select tool again and select it. And you'll notice because it's one solid color, it easily grabs pretty much all of it. I actually turn the threshold down quite a bit. I'll dial it back up a little bit. There we go. So it looks pretty good. So it's got it for the most part selected. So one of the things I do like to do here with these tools, if I want to keep that, I want to get rid of everything else in this image except for the Firebob, I can select it here and then go to select and invert. And now what that does, it's going to select everything except for the Firebob. Now when I click delete, we have that same issue, right? We don't have the transparency because this is a JPEG. So I'm going to add the alpha channel. Oh, sorry about that. We're going to add the alpha channel and I misclicked. There we go. We're going to add alpha channel, delete. And now I have just the Firebob that I can grab and move around. And I may clean that up a little bit. The edges aren't perfect. I would spend some time. I'd probably feather it out a little bit. This is a lower quality graphic. I just pulled off the internet. But I do now, I have that PlayVS logo that I can work with, and I can scale it down if it's not really the size that I'm wanting. scale it down, move tool, and grab it. So you'll notice there's a lot of swapping between tools over and over and over and over, constantly moving from tool to tool and do that. So there are hotkeys. The hotkeys are super handy. I don't have them memorized here for GIMP. I've got the ones for Photoshop pretty much down, but GIMP not so much. So there's my Firebob, and I can kind of put him here and then, so advertise that this is, part of PlayVS. I've got my background. This background was just a gradient. I can show you how I made that. Let me hide all these layers real quick. By the way, if there's a layer that's kind of in the way and you want to see what's behind it, there's an eyeball over to the left of each layer. You can hide those layers. They're still there. You could just hide them. Now, if you hide a layer and then export this as a graphic, then it won't appear. It's only going to export what's visible. So, but for the meantime, I can hide that. So let me hide all of these and kind of start with a clean slate and kind of show you what I'm working with here. I'm going to add an alpha channel like that. There we go. Okay. So if I want to make a background for this, and I'm just going to do something that's a gradient. In the upper left-hand corner, there's the bucket tool. So that's very common. If I want a solid purple background, I can select the bucket tool and just click on my layer and then drop on bucket tool. And now I have a purple background. I'm going to Control Z and get rid of that. But if I right click on the bucket tool, then it gives me the option for the gradient tool. And this is really neat. I like the way that GIMP has this. It's going to show you the gradient in real time as you move it around the layer. So it's really, really handy. But you can select the different types of any types of gradients that you want. You can edit it over here on the right to add colors. This one by default is the foreground to background. Those are dealing with these colors that you have selected in the upper left-hand corner. So my two selected colors are purple and black. So that's going to be foreground, purple, background, black rather. So that is going to be the gradient that I'm creating. So with the gradient tool selected, I can left click, hold, and drag across my layer, and you're going to see that gradient kind of change a little bit based on the angle that I'm pulling it. So I'm just trying to get something that I'm happy with and content. And I kind of like that one. Now I'll let it go. So now my background has a gradient to it. So instead of just the solid black background, which I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, I have my gradient background, and I can add in I can reveal my cropped headshot back in there again, reveal my PlayVS logo down there in the bottom right. If I want to add text to this, there's also a text tool in the upper left-hand corner. Now your text comes through as its own individual layer. So you're going to have to click your text tool, and then on the left side, go through all your settings. You want to change your color to something that's going to really pop. You're going to want to change your font to something that you like. This Avenir Next is something that we use a lot at Spring Hill. And then I would adjust the size to something that's manageable at the very beginning. So I'm going to draw out a text box now. So I have the text tool selected. I'm going to draw the text box, and then I'm going to start typing. Now you'll notice my letters are really spaced out. That is something that you can adjust on the left-hand side over here. I'm going to need to basically highlight that text, and then I'll need to make some adjustments. Oop, there it is right here. Make some adjustments underneath that for the letter spacing option that's available. There's also line spacing as well, which for some reason mine is all messed up, but we'll put that line spacing. Grab my tools back over here, and I can adjust my font size from here as well. You can adjust the font size from above it. So I add my name. Now I mentioned this does come in as its own layer. So you'll notice over here on the right side, it added a text layer, and it's got my font in there. It says Justin Tolbert. Notice that it is underneath this cropped headshot sample layer. So if I use my move tool and I drag my font to the left, it should appear behind my head. I'm going to do that. And there you go. So it kind of disappears behind my head again, because everything is working in layers, and all these elements, these layers all have their own transparency elements. So we want to make sure that if we're working with something that's a JPEG that starts out as a JPEG, it doesn't hold transparency. We've got to add that transparency element. Beyond that, as someone in the chat pointed out, they like to work with JPEGs. That's great, but you've got to construct it with transparency first and then export it as a JPEG. And then with this layer, I can then begin to manipulate things with it. I can select individual letters of it and, change the color of them with my bucket tool, so now the U is black instead of white. So I can make all those little adjustments to it. I can scale that layer if I wanted to. Notice when I scale it, it is going to get a little pixelated. Okay, because you want to start at something large and then reduce. You don't want to start small and then enlarge. That's where pixelation comes into play. So yeah, this is it. I've got about 10 minutes left, but this is a very quick kind of intro crash course to the little things that you can do with some of these graphic editing programs here. I can show you if you go to our Twitter. It's got some things that I've done for this, and I just think it's an area that a lot more coaches can work with and get their own players to do if it's too much for you to do, because I know that you are really busy and you have a lot of stuff going on. But this is something super easy. I think it's kind of fun to work with, and one of the things too is you can also save a lot of these as templates, so you're not having to recreate everything from scratch every single time. So you can save this document here as a GIMP project file, and then come back to it every time after this and begin working in these same layers. When you're finished with it and you want to put it into a format that is distributable, all right, you want to put that on social media or what have you, then you're going to need to go to File and then Export As. Okay, because if you go to save, all you're saving is the project file. And all that does is give you a GIMP project file to work with. So once I've completed my graphic, I want to File, Export As, and this is going to allow you to export this as a file type, as a particular file type. So you can export it as a JPEG image. You can export it as a PNG. You could even export it as a Photoshop image. So if you want to, have it used in something, in a different platform or a program. But exporting it as a PNG will help it maintain some of the transparency elements if you have transparency elements in it. Now that this is constructed, I don't necessarily need the transparency anymore. So now I can File, Export it as, and I'm going to select my file type in the bottom, and I'm going to select a JPEG image. And then I can, obviously type the name of it, choose the save destination, save it to the desktop. This will be sample.jpg. It exports. You can select the quality, usually crank that up. And now I have a JPEG of this. Real quick, someone mentioned earlier liking to work with JPEGs instead of PNGs. Here's where that fails, okay? If you have this image, and let's say I wanted to turn this into a Streamlabs overlay, and I wanted my overlay to have my face over here on the right, and I wanted this to show like my game window behind it or something like that. So if I'm going to remove a section of the background here for it to be like a transparent window like that, I now have to export this as a PNG, because if I export it as a JPEG, this is just going to be black. It's not going to hold the transparency element. It's not going to hold the alpha channel. I've got to export it now as a PNG. And then when I put it into Streamlabs, I have a window. I have all of this overlay, and I have the window, and I can And Streamlabs also works in layers, very similar to GIMP, like you see over here on the right side. I'll just put my background on the top, and you'll notice now that I have where I can move. Well, let me grab that. There we go. Now my Firebob is there. I can move him in and out from behind, and it'll work the same way in Streamlabs. So again, yes, you can work with JPEGs as far as once the final product is done. But if you want to work with something with transparency in a Streamlabs type program and you want to build a full screen overlay, you're going to have to work with PNG so it maintains that transparency element. Okay, so that is it for me. I know it was a lot, and like I said, it was a crash course, but it does hopefully give you a start, and you can kind of start playing around with GIMP a little bit. And then if things get tough, feel free to reach out to me. I'm gonna throw my email in the chat as well, so you can please email me if you want to work with this a little bit more. I can hop into a WebEx or a Google Meet with you, and we can go over some other things. If you want some more tips or you're stuck, I can do that as well. But other than that, that is it for this. So I tried to fit in as much as I could in 55 minutes.
Yeah, and we'll send out the recording to all attendees too. So if you want to go at this at your own pace again too, through what everything Justin showed today, you'll have that as well to do. And I'll also include the link to his Google Drive and any other links that were shared today, like just the website for stuff like that again. And I'll share Justin's email as well too. And that. But yeah, any questions here in the last 5 minutes we have? Awesome. Totally welcome, Julie. Yeah, we'll if there's no questions, we will end here. Thank you everyone who joined. Thank you, Justin, as always, for an amazing presentation, very comprehensive presentation. I think, I think there's a great resource for a lot of coaches, and we'll make sure to, get this out so more folks are aware as well too after today. I think it's really important. It's so important with promoting your own brand for so many reasons, as you mentioned. It's like professional development for your students. It's showing a lot of schools. It's an educational thing as well too. A lot of schools don't know what their esports programs are doing. So the more you can kind of promote your brand and what your teams are doing is always a benefit. So I want to thank you again. Thank you again for everyone who has attended, and we'll see you next time. Take care, everyone.